better than we ever imagined. So first of all, thank you guys all for coming out. We have a very unique program here tonight that not any library would be able to offer this kind of local history. So first I want to thank Terry for even approaching me with it. It's not something that we'd ever done before, so Mr. Hawke approached me and I said, yeah, let's give it a shot. Worst case, nobody shows up, and I think we've far exceeded that. Before we dive into the program, I just want to give a shout out to a few things. We've got some flyers on the table in the back there. Don't rush up there now. We're trying to get some program feedback, what you guys like, how we can bring more interesting programs to you guys. So there's a flyer over there with a QR code. There's also a paper copy or two if you prefer that. And then we have just a few other awesome events coming up. We have our summer reading program, of course. That's our big annual challenge. You sign up for free, you complete challenges, activities, and log some reading, and you get the chance at some awesome prizes, thanks to many of our sponsors. Next week, Wednesday, we have the DSO on the Go program here. So we're going to have a few members of the DSO come here to play some live music. On this Saturday, we have the 100-year history of the yo-yo, another unique program that I've never seen another library offer. We've got plenty of space for that. That's Saturday at 4 o'clock. A week from Monday, June 9th, we have the Michigan Notable Author book tour author coming here. That is When Detroit Played the Numbers, all about the history of gambling and so on in Detroit. This author is going around to a handful of libraries throughout the state, and we were very excited to be selected for that. But you guys didn't come to hear me yap, so without any further ado, please welcome Mr. Terry Hawke.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm known to whisper and everybody hears what I'm saying, so if you can't hear me, we do have a microphone backup. If you need to hear me better, is everything okay?
You're good. You're good.
All right, my name is Terry Hawke. I'm the grandson of Allen Edward Hawke that built the Hawke Tool here in Clarkston. Hawke Tool started in 1932 in Detroit, Michigan. And before that, my grandpa was a foreman and a superintendent for Ford Motor, Highland Park. And I think about Highland Park, and I think about my grandpa being a superintendent. That's when they developed the assembly line, was the Highland Park plant. So I never got a chance to really talk to Grandpa about the assembly line. I started a business in '72. My grandpa passed away in '82. So when we got together, a lot of it had to do with manufacturing and machining, and I didn't really get into his personal life much about what happened before. It had to be very interesting working in Highland Park in the late 20s, or through the 20s. He was born in Canada. He moved over here in 1911 and married my grandma in 1914, and they had 3 children, my dad, uncle, and an aunt. And obviously they weren't uncle and aunt. And just as a tip, I was told, if you're ever nervous talking in front of a group, just picture them. How? No, not like that. Picture them on a pony cycle. Picture them all sitting on a pony cycle. So while they're all on a pony cycle, that way I can associate with you, So my grandpa started, like I say, Hawke Tool in 1932. And it had to be interesting times then, too, right after the Depression for starting a business. He worked as he was working with Ford Motor, he had, and I don't know, again, the details, he had a patent or he had a design for the stamped wheel. Now, back before the 30s, all the wheels were spoke wheels, where they had spokes. And Grandpa was working at Ford, and Bud Wheel and Ford were working together, and my grandpa came up with this wheel design, which today we still have stamped wheels. So I don't know what exactly it was, because he was an employee for Ford, I don't know how that patent deal went, but Grandpa didn't get the patent rights on that. When we take a break, I have some things over here that my grandpa did patent. And one of them that's kind of interesting, because The Depression was, we've only read about it. It was pretty bad. And a lot of people had victory gardens or had, plots of land that they would, or they would go to the farmer's market and they would buy produce, by the bushel. My mom always loved it when my dad would come home with a bushel of tomatoes and say, "Here, honey," it's like, we're going to can tomatoes all weekend, So Grandpa, the important thing when you're canning is you sterilize your jars. You have them on a big pot, sterilizing them. You've got your produce, whatever you're going to put in the can. But Grandpa always thought there's a time between the hot, you pull this out of the boiling water, put it on the counter, and then fill it with whatever you're putting in there and put the cap on. So Grandpa came up with this pot, which actually, it keeps the water from getting on your counter. You put it down, it holds the water dripping off your jar, and you can hold it and screw the top on and off. And let it go, and then pull it up. You put it in, screw it, put the top on. And so that was pretty ingenious, because you'd have to have towels on your counter when you pull all these jars out. So when it gets full of water, you just dump that out. So this is a Hawke patent. He does patent pending on it. And an interesting thing, Grandpa took E off of Hawke. My name is Hawke with an E, H-A-W-K-E. Grandpa took the E off of Hawke because he didn't want people calling it hockey tool. Just didn't have a ring to it. He didn't like it. And I still get called hockey once in a while, with the E. And so he took the E off of Hawke. So throughout history of Hawke tool gets an E on the end of it, and my dad or Grandpa's name doesn't have an E on it. People got all confused with that. So just to clarify, it's not a misspelling when you see Hawke tool and then Hawke with an E. So that's just a little bit of history, but I think it's important to know, as best we can, keep our family history going. And Clarkston was a village industry for Ford Motor. They call them village industries. And Ford not only had the hydro plant, where they had the big generator and the creek ran underneath the shop. As a kid, I saw the generator, and it looked like R2-D2 with Star Wars. It was a big round pot going up in the air, and at the top it had two big chrome balls that were governors, and they call it balls out. When that thing's spinning too fast, it would go out and slow down the generator and bring it back in. I never saw it working. I don't know if it was ever set up at the shop, but they had it in storage in the basement of the shop over there. And then, of course, the creek ran underneath from the mill pond underneath the shop to the back of the shop. So that was one of Ford's. And then Ford had he had a school here on Main Street that became the City Hall later in time. And that had a steam engine in it for power, for electricity. And then Ford also had the Ford Farm, which was out Holcomb Road. And the Ford Farm, we did a lot of riding of the pony cycles around the Ford Farm. I mean, I've been riding since I was 8 years old, and it's a 250-pound bike, so I had to be big enough to pick it up and big enough to start it. So of course, ever since I was 5 years old, I've been trying to pick that bike up and start it. So I was probably 8, well, I was 8 when I started riding. And after the parades, and at times we would have groups of people getting together, and they would ride pony cycles around Clarkston. And we'd always end up at the Ford Farm. Right around the farm, they had hills, they had tractors all over the place. It was a proving ground for tractors. So we were up and down hills and hill and dale, and just had a really good time riding the bikes. And at 8 years old, I'm riding on the road. That's pretty cool. That's way before I could get a license. At that particular time, you could be 14 to drive a motor scooter. So of course, my luck was when I got 14, you had to be 16 to drive a scooter. So when you're 16, who wants a scooter when you can have a car? So the scooter life kind of fell aside until 84. My dad came over to my house, and my kids were little, and he had a bike laying on its side, and he dragged it out of the van, and he said, "Here you go, son." And he basically dropped it on the ground, and it was an old beat-up pony cycle that had been kicking around the shop forever, and I got it running that day and rode it around with the kids, and that bike was with me for a long time. This one is well, I don't know if you want to call it restored. This one is all together 100%. It's backyard painted, but it's all there. So, you know, it's not for an award. It's just one that's all together. It's a 56, and it's a real hot rod too. It's got a real straight pipe on it, and it's fun. So, the Ford industry. So, Ford was here for about 4 to 5 years with the hydrant plant. And it's interesting, according to history, they made drill bushings and seat covers. I mean, drill bushings and seat covers. The two, I just don't understand how that worked. I can't imagine. They must have had an area with screw machines set up, and then they must have had an area with sewing machines. I mean, I would think, you know? I mean, the two are really pretty odd. It's drill bushings and seat covers. That's what Ford claims. So it sat vacant, the building, for a couple of years, and then my grandpa bought a farm, or Hawke Tool bought a farm in Rochester, 160 acres, right around Oakland University, at Tinkin and Squirrel. And Grandpa was going to move the shop onto the farm. And really, you know, in the 30s and 40s, it wasn't unusual to have, if you had a barn or a garage with a dirt floor, you'd put a machine in it, and you could, I mean, it wasn't that big a deal to just whatever you had, you would use as a, you know, as a building to machine stuff. But Dad, well, I'm going to say Dad found the plant in Ford, the Ford plant here in Clarkston. And so they kept the farm, but they expanded all along Rudy's, the alley that goes between, you know, the factory and Rudy's. That was all added on by Hawke Tool. So we added all that on, and we brought up to 100 employees that we had working here in Clarkston. And then we had another shop out on White Lake, right at the railroad tracks at White Lake, across from the, it's now a theater, across from the Clarkston Depot, you know. So that particular plant did assembly and painting, and this plant did all the machining. This bike, we stamped the wheels, we rolled, it bent all the tubing, we welded everything, we had a machine. It was a progressive, 5 progressive dies that would roll the fenders out, and put the little. Our pony cycles are unique for the kink in the fender right here, that extra little bend, and then eventually we made even the handlebars. And this was a story my dad always told. In manufacturing, we were buying them for Schwinn for $1. Grandpa wanted to make them, so we were making them for $2. Dad, Grandpa won, you know, and the Schwinn handlebar had a knurl here in the middle where the headlight would bolt on for a bicycle. That maybe Grandpa didn't like that, I don't know. But so these were made here in Clarkston. All the stamped parts, all of this was made locally right here in Clarkston. And I just can't imagine. When I think about, we got up to 500 units a month, but we lost the contract with Montgomery Wards because we weren't able to make enough. But I don't know when we got to 500. Was it little, you know, too late, too little, too late? How that went? You imagine 500 of these? I mean, even now, let's go 125 a week. I mean, you're talking filling this whole room up with these scooters. That's a lot of space, just moving them around, not to mention even assembling them. You know, the stamping, they could stack a whole bunch of wheels together, you know, and when they, you know, until they're welded. But thinking about this thing being, and now it has to be boxed up and shipped with, you know, through a semi, you know, all over the country. We had a contract. Originally, this is the style of bike. My dad and Grandpa bought a prototype, 3/4 size. It wasn't this full size. And they bought it, they were doing work for Saginaw Products up in Saginaw, Michigan. And they were doing tool and die work and making stamping parts or making dies for them at Saginaw Stamping. And an engineer came up with this little scooter, and he wanted Saginaw to buy it, but they didn't want to. So my dad and Grandpa, they never had a product of their own. So that's how this bike came around. The name Pony Cycle, I'm going to take credit saying I wanted a pony as a kid. However, I had to be really small in 48 when they, 49, you know, they came up with this. But so I never got a straight answer as to how they got the name Pony Cycle. But but that's the name they've stuck with. Montgomery Wards took it, and of course, they didn't want Hawke Tool, they didn't want Pony Cycle, they wanted everything to say Montgomery Wards on it. And, you know, I know most everyone here, maybe my granddaughter, maybe not, but everyone here knows Sears and Roebuck and Montgomery Wards. They were the Amazon of the time. You know, they were it. That was it. Anything and everything you could get through those two stores. So we had a market. There's no question about it. And going out to dinner one night, we were on our way. Dad was a member of Elks in Pontiac. And on the way to dinner, we went up Williams Lake Road, and there's a GM warehouse along Williams Lake Road, right at the railroad tracks. And Dad showed us, he was showing Mom and us kids, or, you know, that they were looking at buying that building for the idea of the pony cycle. They needed more space, you know. Here in Clarkston and out at the railroad tracks, and then they bought the old meat locker that used to be in the north end of town that eventually got swallowed up by the expressway, but they had another big warehouse there. But still, they didn't have enough space, you know. So I think really they got kind of caught up. You know, it's a dream come true to get a marketing through Montgomery Wards or Sears, you know. But after that, financially, they had a huge inventory of parts that they had made, that they had bought, like the seats and the lights and handle grips. We didn't make those, you know. We bought those, and the tires. Now, probably, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to say, how old are you when you can go to work with your dad and not be underfoot? You know, what are you, 5, 6 years old? So I'm thinking maybe I was 6 years old when I'd come to work with my dad. And I would go down into the basement. They had the wood shop. Because a lot of the work they did was government contract, government work for the Armored Division of Army. And lower production, but still government work. And most government works needed to be in wood boxes, you know, to be shipped. It had to be, they gave you blueprints to how to make the wooden box. So we had a wood shop, you know, that would slice the wood and build it. So us kids would get down there, and all these scraps of wood, we'd make machine guns and sword fights and all sorts of fun. But also, they had all these tires stored down there, and they had handlebars stored, and they had motors stored, so you could make a fort. And I'm sure the people that took inventory probably hated us once they found out we moved everything around, you know. I mean, this was pretty cool. We could take all these tires and stack them up here, and we could take the motors. They were pretty heavy, but we could slide them over here, and we could go to the wood shop and get some wood swords, and man, we could really have fun down there, you know. But all this stuff got moved around. But the employees at Hawke Tool were pretty cool. They, I think they got a kick out of watching us kids jumping around and playing, you know. Once I started riding the bikes, they were a life sent because, you know, you need oil, you need gas, you need air, you know. So yeah, okay, here's the gas can, Terry. Go to Morgan's, which is the old-time gas station in Clarkston. You know, go to Morgan's. We got an account there. Get gas. Put the gas in. You know, I need air in the tires. Okay, well, here you go. Here's the air hose. Now, well, what do I do with the air hose? You know, so you know, it's kind of how if I wanted to ride it, I had to work on it. You know, and that's the same thing. My dad, we had a bike at home as I was growing up, and the same with a bicycle. Anything that went wrong with it, had to fix it. I mean, Dad, he would maybe fix it, you know, if you could wait a year or so. I mean, it was never on his agenda like it was on mine. So, so that was kind of a fun thing. Now, Jan's keeping me on track. My wife Jan here. Because I get off track a little bit, and I'm way off track, so she has no idea where I'm at. I don't know if I do. Anyway, we turned around. My upbringing was, I was born in Detroit, and we moved to Pontiac when I was 4 years old. So we lived at Dixie Highway in Scott Lake up until my senior year of high school. And so all my schooling primarily was in Pontiac, except for my senior year. It was in Clarkston. So as far as knowing certain people in Clarkston, I didn't have a long term here in Clarkston, but coming to Clarkston was pretty cool because I had my grandma, the house next to the shop, it's just west of the shop, is my grandma and grandpa's house. And that was built in 1953, and so my grandma lived next to the shop. Now, how cool is that? You know, I mean, I could get dirty, I could cut myself. Grandma was right there to clean me up, fix me up, and lunch, you know, hey, that was pretty cool, you know. But I had to go to the drugstore. I had to go to Rudy's Market to get hamburger or to get sausage or whatever Grandma wanted. I had to go to the bank, and I remember going to the bank where the counter was like nose level with me. And I'm at the bank with this bank book, handing it up, trying to reach it up to the teller. You know, evidently it was something that I took to the bank, and I'm sure Grandma called the bank and said, you know, he's on his way, you know. But so anyway, and then we had the post office was in town right here too. All this was downtown. And all was fine and dandy, but I got sidetracked going once in a while because I loved going between the buildings. And still, you have such a unique town here. You've got like a 3-foot section between the bank and the post office and Rudy's, or not Rudy's, the other way. And it was so neat going down the alleyway and cutting between those buildings. It was like, you know, secret passage, you know. I'm the only one that knew about it, you know. I mean, out of all of Clarkston, nobody else knew about that. But, so Grandma would wonder where I went, and I kind of got a little sidetracked, you know. And of course, you'd go to Rudy's, and he always had a treat for you, you know. I mean, you know, here's a candy bar or a sucker or, you know, something that he was pretty cool. Rudy's Market definitely is a found. I'm glad to see they kept the name here, you know, Rudy's, you know. So anyway, that was some of my upbringing. And then when I was 13 or 14, they kind of took me under their wing. The tool and die guy got with me, and the welder, and they worked with me on welding, on working the grinders and the lathe and the drill presses. And I'm sure that's part of why I had my business for 42 years. I knew how to run these machines and do all that. And I made a four-wheel dragster, which was, I think, pretty cool. It was 4 wheels. It had a rack and pinion steering, and the motor was in front, a big 12-horse Wisconsin motor. The transmission was between your legs, and I was sitting on the axle. And we lived at Dixie and Scott Lake, which Dixie Highway is a pretty main road. There was a traffic light right there at Dixie and Scott Lake. And I used to race cars on the sidewalk from the traffic light. Of course, I always won every race I had. Nobody knew I was racing them, you know. So, but I mean, it was fun playing with that. So, you know, by welding, by learning how to do all of that, that was all part of growing up at that time, you know, that I was there. The town of Clarkston, all I can say is it's so cool that they kept it like this. I just hope they can keep it like this. You know, you've got a lot of really neat stuff here in this village, you know. And so now there's questions that come up, and you can always ask me a question whenever. If you ask too many, well, that's different. But
when you did errands for your grandma, did you drive a pony cycle?
No, I couldn't ride him around like that. I had to ride him when there was a group of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, at least until I got older.
There you go.
No, because the house was right next door.
Right.
You know, like from here to the parking lot.
Yeah. But
So-
if you had to go to the market or the bank or whatever.
Yeah, right. No, I footed it because then again, that's only a half a block away from the shop.
Oh,
I mean, it was
okay.
all on foot, you know.
There you go.
So anyway, but the questions that are asked, how many were made? I don't know. To this day, I don't know. I picked up a bike in West Virginia, I don't know, half a year ago or something like that. And it had a strange serial number. According to my dad, this style, he started the serial number at 500. You know, like Harley starts at 1,000. Dad started at 500. So I have serial numbers up to like 590 something. So that makes sense, you know, 590, you know, that's the 90th one made. Then the state of Michigan wanted us to use the serial number off the motors. So we never bought the motors in sequence. You know, you'd buy 50 or 100 at a time, and we lost track of all the production. Then the bike I bought in West Virginia is this style, and it has 57-108. Well, 108 is way under 500, but 57, these started to be built in 54, all of them are 54 dash. So I'm thinking, well, 57, 108, so maybe they made, like their first run of these was maybe over 100, 110, let's make 110, see how they sell. And then as they were assembling them, they got the contract from Montgomery Ward's. Now I'm putting this together, it's a puzzle, but they got the contract from Montgomery Ward's, and your time, this bike is the coolest bike of them all, but this isn't the bread and butter. I mean, Montgomery Ward's was the one paying all the bills. So they pretty much put this style of bike off on the shelf. It was kind of sidelined because all their time and effort went into the Montgomery Ward bike. And that makes sense to me. So I'm thinking that they went back in 57 and saw parts to put a bike together, and they decided it's the 108th of the original 100 bikes that we made, so let's call it 57-108. This one does not have a number, so I don't know what number, where this one fit into line, because like I say, they stopped stamping them, so.
Was the Monkey Ward bike a lesser model?
Yes.
It was.
It was the scooter style, the step through. Right here, this is the Montgomery Ward style, was this style. And there's one up there in the museum right now. It's this one here that's called the Special, and this is the Deluxe, and this was in the museum a year ago. And so we switched it out. I gave them another bike to show at the museum here. And then, of course, this one is this bike here. We made one other with a larger motor in it called the Supreme. And it was a lesser, lesser style. It's called a scooter.
Right. So you could ride somebody on the back too with you.
You could, yeah.
Yeah,
A lot of
that's
these
why I
had
like
the
it.
buddy seat on them too,
Right, right.
And fact is,
Yeah,
Jan's gonna love this one. Jan doesn't know about this. We've got pictures up here, and when you take a break, I'll show you. But we can turn around. And you can ride double on that.
Yeah, see?
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's when Jan and I both could fit on the scooter. We're good cooking. Yes.
How many of these pony cycles do you have in your own personal possession?
Oh, now you got me on that one.
And your wife hasn't thrown you out yet because you have too many.
I have too many, yeah, okay, there you go. It depends on, I've got a lot that as I'm getting hold of parts, I'm putting parts together.
How many do you have that are totally put together then? Make it easy on you. Don't look
I
at
mean,
me.
do I have total? Maybe 6, 7, I've got a sidecar that was, and then we made 178 of the sidecars. Remember that one?
Oh, yeah.
We made 178 of the sidecar model for the government, for Army Air Force. And at the time, after the Korean War, there still wasn't a real Air Force. It was Army Air Force. So some of them were blue and some of them were olive drab. Army was olive drab and the Air Force was blue. This is 178 of these. Jan and I bought the bike, pictured up here, from Chicago, in Chicago area, Elgin. And the guy told me the sidecar was scrapped. Well, okay, I'm going to make a sidecar. Well, you know how that goes. You're going to get around to it, right? Somebody a few years ago said, hey, Terry, I know where somebody has a sidecar. Not the bike, but just the sidecar to a pony cycle. And I go, really? And he said, the guy's had it 30 years up in his barn up in Minnesota, northern Minnesota. I said, wow. So I got on the phone, and he and I are talking, and we came to an agreement, according to how he described it to me. And I said, well, I need to have it shipped down. So I called U-Haul, or U-Ship, or whatever. And I said, but I need a picture of the bike, of the part, of the sidecar. He sent me a picture of the sidecar. It's the exact serial number of the bike we had. So the bike was made in '55. It was torn apart because Hawke Tool, the government wanted them one piece. They did not want them detachable because they could see people taking the sidecar and undoing it, just riding it as a two-wheel bike, instead of a sidecar. So it was sawed off. And this was a perfect match. The serial number, when I restored the bike, I kept the back of the box original. I put it in like a frame. And on the front, up here on the kickboard there, is a plaque that has the number, U1645. So it's the exact bike all put together after all these years. This has been written up in a number of the biker magazines and stuff. So it's kind of a cool little detail,
So who owned what? You don't go around just buying a sidecar.
You pardon me again? What?
Well, obviously you did, but I mean, who separated it? And, it's like, how does one get in Minnesota and the other one get stuck in Georgia?
Good point, and I was told it was scrapped. Why would I not believe that,
Go to a garage sale, well, this looks like a good
here we go.
Talk about Portland, where everybody there is a scooter nut. So there's hundreds of people there, and they're all into scooters. So they know.
Like a swap meet.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, how I
that's
found
how
out
we
about
found
it and
out.
stuff?
Well, yeah, but I mean, still separating a sidecar from the bike itself.
Well, a two-wheeler is a lot cooler riding than a sidecar, at least when you want to be a rebel. Yeah, a sidecar is cooler now. We enjoy it because it's like a golf cart, But the two wheels, that's why the government wanted them one piece. But you can also imagine a bike like this, one piece to the government. So here's the bike, here's the box coming out, and it wasn't to carry people, it was utilitarian. It was for repairs for the airport. The bombers and all that were way away from the hangars, so they would run parts back and forth with either a Jeep or with this little scooter. So this has got the big box. It's all one piece. Had to be boxed in wooden boxes and shipped. Plywood, wooden boxes. That's how they shipped them. The government wanted everything in wood at that time. Embraced and I can imagine loading a semi with these big, huge boxes. It takes up a lot of space.
Were any of those shipped out? Was some assembly required, or was it totally?
No,
as you got it, and you just
a lot of them came with the handlebar detached, so it would be in a narrower box. And so you had to put the handlebar on, and that was about it. But that made the box, instead of being this wide, made the box narrower. So it was pretty simple that way, it's putting together. And of course, when it went to Montgomery Ward's, they probably were put together at the shop. I worked at Montgomery Ward's in Ann Arbor back in the late '60s, and all the bikes we had to put together. At the time they were the Riverside, the scooter, the bike, motorcycle. But that's how they went. So it's pretty cool that we could, after all those years of being apart, they got back together. So, and that's why I kept the original paint on it, on that one part of the box. So the guy thought it was good. He actually, when he bought the box, he thought it would fit a different bike. He thought it would fit a Mustang that was made in California that has the same size wheels. So that's how he came about buying it. He didn't know it was a pony cycle. He had no idea what it was. He had it. It wasn't for a Mustang. And this guy that I knew from, like Jan said, Portland, Indiana, the big swap meet, he knew about pony cycles, and he knew me, and he saw a picture, and he said, that guy's got it in the rafters of his barn, so we got it. So we had the different styles. We made, at the time now, we're talking in the mid-50s, Disney World out in California was just being put together in the 50s. We made a carnival car, hoping that Disney would want it. It was a three-wheel, two wheels in front, one wheel in the back. The wheel in the back was driven in the brake, and then it had a rack and pinion steering. And we made just one sample of that, trying to convinced not only Disney at the time, but other amusement parks that were kind of going to these scooters, you know, with a gasoline motor, where people, you know, they had sides, so you couldn't really get in a lot of trouble, but you would ride around the track. So we made one of those. That was really fun driving though, because it's three-wheeled, so you could take a corner, and the back of it was kind of squared off. So you take a corner and you drag in the metal, sparks would fly, and yeah, you go, and it wouldn't tip, but you could. Yeah, I mean, you'd pick up the front wheel, so you'd be on two wheels going around corners, and that was very tippy, but fun to ride around. Now Hawke Tool, I'm way off course, but anyway, Hawke Tool has the river going underneath it. You know, it's a beautiful piece of property. You know, I mean, salesmen loved coming out to Hawke Tool. It was like the atmosphere of a country club, you know. Grandpa loved his flowers. He was tool and die, but he was a gardener. Grandma loved her violets, and she loved the gardening, and they had garden club over there all the time. And so the house was beautiful all around the shop. We used to weed. One of my jobs, weed that whole canal between all the rocks. It's lined. When Ford did the mill pond, he lined it in rocks. When he did the river going out, you know, out to Depot Park, all of that is lined with rocks. And so we had to pull all those weeds out of those rocks, you know, and keep our toes out of the water for the crawfish wouldn't be nipping at our toes, you know. But that was one of the jobs. But the road around the shop was like a racetrack. So it kind of is like that right now. They have it as a walking bridge. But at the back end of the shop, I know a lot of you know about, you know, the parking lot and all that is behind the Clarkston Mills. So we had like a racetrack. So that's exactly what we did out these pony cycles. And then Grandpa had a utilitarian bike made up with a big basket in the front. And it was a pony cycle like this, but the front end had two wheels that would steer with a handlebar, and there was a box here. And Grandpa used it as his wheelbarrow. I mean, he would put dirt in there, and he'd haul it all around, and manure, and pots of flowers, and all that. Well, as kids, you know, we don't do that. We wanted to ride in it.
Yeah.
So what do? We get the broom, we sweep out this whole box here as best we can. I mean, we sweep it best we can. Didn't have leaf blowers, but we did. So the first one to ride that bike, after you swept it out, you ended up with dirt in your mouth, your eyes, because every bump, there's dirt coming out of every little crack and cranny, no matter how you cleaned it. So it was never like, no, you ride it first. No, you ride it. I'm not riding it first, you know. Let someone else ride it and get all the dirt knocked off it. And then we would ride around it. And I have a picture, I have a book I put out with stories about growing up with the pony cycle and still growing up with them. And there's a picture of my great Aunt Irene and my mom in their dresses, their summer dresses, sitting in the front of this box pony cycle, and my brother, he's 4 years older, he was driving it. Oh, would that have been fun driving? Oh, would I have loved to have driven my mom and aunt around in that. I think I was a little too reckless for them. So. But it's really cool, because they're sitting there with their nice little dresses, and they put a little board there for them to sit on, and just really, really cool, you know. So, yeah, the pony cycle as a kid was absolutely fantastic. I wasn't in the finances of it, so I can only imagine how much they had built in inventory and how much they had borrowed, you know, for the bank to buy the tires, the motors. The motor they did not make. The motor was made out of Detroit Continental. Continental Motor made motors for lift trucks, for trucks. They had a single cylinder division in Detroit. And Hawke Tool originally started just down the road from Continental. So I'm sure Grandpa did a lot of tool and die work for Continental, and they probably had it in with it. We did go to Clinton, Michigan for a picnic. They were wining and dining, my dad and Hawke Tool, so our family got invited to a big picnic in Clinton. And Clinton made a motor, a little motor like this, and they really wanted us to use their motor in the pony cycle. And I remember this day, that picnic was pretty cool thing, you know, I mean, all these people are wine and dining my dad and mom, you know, I mean, trying to get them to get a contract, you know, to Clinton, you know, but we didn't. We stuck to Continental, and then we used Kohler, and Kohler is a well-known engine even today, you know. The bigger bikes had the Kohler on it, excuse me. They came, you had accessories, you could get, Montgomery Ward wanted everything to go through their store. So they told my grandpa that they didn't want to even have a foot pad on here, a floor mat, if you will. And Grandpa said, no, it's gotta have a floor mat, it's gotta have hand grip, you know. They wanted you to go and buy accessories from their store. Interesting, our original floor mat was the cutout of the Lincoln car. At the time, the cars had Navahide or had rubber mat with a cloth, you know, with a carpet insert. So the carpet insert was the size of our mat. So we were buying from surplus, we were buying the scrap mat that they cut out of the Lincoln cars at the time. You know, now they're reversed around. You've got carpet and you've got the rubber in the middle of the pad.
How about checking the bikes on the railroad?
Oh. Plant 2 was at White Lake in the railroad track, right across from the depot. And they tested the bikes, running them down the railroad track, running them across the railroad ties. And what broke, they reinforced, and even as a kid, I can't imagine, I was pretty rough on them, but I still can't imagine driving down a railroad, you know, testing that bike. So that was one of the tests they did, because that's where they were assembled and painted, was right there at White Lake Plant, you know. Also, now that you asked, I sat in an engineer's seat of a big steam engine at Grand Trunk. I was in the right-hand side, sitting up on the seat, the boiler going all the way up to where David is in the back of the building there, and steam coming up out of the boiler, and all these gauges and cool handles that I wasn't allowed to touch, but they're right there, tempting, and they were doing a switching. So we ran a couple miles up and, you know, a couple miles back, but to this day, sitting up on that engineer's seat, looking all the way up that boiler was pretty cool, you know. Steam engines, you know, diesels were just kind of coming into play in the 50s. So I'm aging myself, but that's life, you know. So anyway, that was one of the tests that they did, and it was pretty cool. The design of the gas tank is 2 dies, 2 pieces. They stamped it out in-house. They stamped them, and 2 pieces made the gas tank, and 1 piece made the belt cover. Now what they did, this has got a bigger motor in it, so the motor had to be moved up. So it's 2 pieces. They took 2 belt covers and made 1. But normally it's this die is the same die as this. And it went through an extra process to stamp the hole for the end. We made the brakes, we made the transmission, the clutch, and the variable speed pulley back here. And up until the very end of Hawke Tool, they made those parts for other manufacturers. I have a 1901 replica Oldsmobile. It was made in Florida in the 70s, and it's got 4 of our pony cycle brakes on it. It's got our transmission on it, where we sold to other manufacturers. Even though we weren't making the bike, you know, we were selling our product. They kept that product line. In another bike, Simplex in New Orleans, they were buying our wheels, our stamped wheels. And I remember this too, because I was probably 12, 13 years, maybe 10 years old, 10, 12 years old. My dad spent like a whole month down in New Orleans. We got sued because they were taking our wheels, and instead of welding them the way we recommended, they were bolting them together, the 2 halves. Which is fine and dandy, except come to find out they didn't have a regulator on the air impact wrench, and a tire blew up in a kid's face, and really, an employee's face, and really messed him up. I don't think he died, but so we were being sued, but then it all ended up that we were right, they were wrong, because they did not put them together the way we told them to. And they didn't have a regulator on the impact hammer, but it was a big lawsuit, you know, big one, you know, so. And of course, OSHA and, you know, safety isn't what it was today. Thank goodness we have better safety, you know. I mean, there's a lot of things that manufacturing got away with that you can't get away with today, you know. So, and the other thing was the fender roller was cool. That was at Plant 2. They'd buy the stripped metal, and it would run through the roller, and the roller was like a 5 progressive dies. So the sheet metal would come in. It would come in like this into the machine. It would be on a big roll up here. It would come through, and every die would put an extra little bend in it, and it would curl it around, and at the very end, it would slice it, cut it to the length you wanted. And every once in a while, they'd run those through and not cut them, and it would come out like a spring. And it was kind of fun as a kid crawling through there. Of course, you get all cut up, but and rusty old. Well, they weren't necessarily rusty, but I remember climbing through them and getting cut up because. But anyway, that was interesting to see how this stuff was made. I had jobs to do if I'm over there once I got. I mean, even at 6 years old, they handed me a broom to, you know, here, do this or sort these papers or something. One of the cool jobs that I remember, and I would like to even do it today, is I filled the pop machine at the end of the shop. And it was a Pepsi machine, and it had the slide rails on it, the rails. So you put your money in, and you slide your pop along the rails and bring it up, and then you pull it up through the trap door. And my job was to fill that pop machine, clean it and fill it. And my reward was a pop. So that was pretty cool, you know. Was I taken advantage of? No. I got the right pony cycles, you know. But that was one of the memories that I had that I thought was pretty cool. But we got up, to 500 well, it doesn't matter, 500 of these units a month we got up to. I mean, that's pretty, when you think about the area, how big of an area do you need to store 500 of these units? Yes?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you manufactured these, did you do them in a group assembly or like a Henry Ford assembly line?
Very good, an assembly line. Very good. Plant 2 had a 2x4. I remember the 2x4, and we had roller chain, you know, that you'd use for the drive, going between the 2x4s, and they had a straight line that went on down, and then back underneath, came back, and you'd put a bike on. And then we had bins, metal bins with all the parts in it, and the men would go to the bins, get the parts, put them on the bike, and it would move down. Now, I remember it moved manually. You know, in other words, okay, we're now moving the bike up. You know, it wasn't like a continuous, but it still moved along. And I still have some of those metal bins that we use the bolts and screws out of. And, I love it. Then we had, in painting, we had a conveyor line. A continuous conveyor that went around, and they would hang the parts on the conveyor line, and it would go along the conveyor line, and it would go into the spray booth, which had a waterfall behind it. And we had a Mexican sprayer, painter, and he taught me the word aqua for water, because it had the waterfall behind it to keep the dust and the fumes, the dust down. And then from the waterfall, it was enamel paint. From the waterfall, it went into the drying oven. Big heat lamps that would dry it. It would come out the other end, and fans would blow it off so you could handle it somewhat. And the employees would take the parts off and put new parts on. So it would just continually. And Grandpa had the original bikes, the original 100 and whatever, were all painted dark blue, Ford dark blue. So he painted all the parts after they were assembled. And for $5, you could have it red, yellow, white, what other color would there have been? Maybe yellow, I don't know, or whatever. For $5, they would take that blue bike, they'd have it all together, and they'd paint it, you know, whatever color. We did about a dozen bikes for the Shriner Club, and the Shriners wanted them white. And Grandpa and Dad got into a dispute. Dad wanted the bikes all be brand new. You know, I mean, they're like, we sold them. Let's get brand new bikes. And and put them together and sell them to, the Shriners want 12 of these bikes, or 20, whatever it was. So they took the dark blue bikes, and they painted them white. And it bled through. And they painted it white, and it bled through. My dad said, I think it was like 3 or 4 coats of white paint before they finally got it. There was so much paint on that bike, it was like, so much cheaper it would have been to build all brand new, but, they took the inventory off the shelf and built it, so, we silk screened. Now this is a vinyl screen, which Bill has lined me up with a guy in Holly, Michigan that has that makes these. We turned around and had a silk screen for that. And I remember probably, I'm going to say 12, silk screening t-shirts. We had the screen, I'd pull it down, we put t-shirts, so everyone had a pony cycle t-shirt. And I've had some made up with the silk screen. I still have a silk screen. So I'm not in the t-shirt business. I'm not in the book business either, but I do have books. But anyway, I think this history, I put together stories in different magazines, and the magazine is there, but in a book it's all pony cycle. So for the history of the pony cycle, hopefully, 70 years now the bike's been around. I'm hoping another 70 years. My granddaughter's over here, so we got to see how she's going to do with this. I don't think she's so interested in the pony cycle right this minute. But hey, you'll be old someday, Look forward, So we have all the tooling, we have the machines, the knowledge. I had somebody a die just recently got sold. A guy had a die made to stamp the gas tank out. And not only is it knowing the die, you got to know the annealment, you got to know the material, you got to know. It's not just taking a piece of metal and stamping it out. There's a whole lot of information. I never got into the die, tool and die part of it. I never made a die. I made up tools and fixtures. Where you got the expansion and you got the contraction and you got certain oils you use and annealing of the different materials. So, I passed on it. I didn't buy the die, and I don't know what the guy's going to do with it. It took a pretty big press though to press it out. And the guy that made it made some of those, and I bought them from him. Some of the blanks, but he's passed away, and the die is out there. So. The Air Force had a bike. My dad and his brother and my aunt, all became incorporated right around the time they bought Clarkston plant. And my aunt, she was a colonel's wife, and my uncle was the colonel in the Air Force, and he was all over the world. And so he was all over. So he had a 1960 Cadillac convertible. Now, 59 and 60, these bikes were huge, cars. So the government would take, they would fly anything you wanted. That was all part of your assignment, So I think he was in Belgium, and he's driving this Cadillac that's the size of a truck, parking it in a place where they'd put maybe 3 or 4 little cars, and the attention that people would bring to see that Cadillac was pretty cool. I mean, even today, the Cadillac's beautiful, but can you imagine, that, here, we'll take your car. They didn't realize it was a, 60 Cadillac, So that was kind of fun that they turned around. So we tried to sell the bike as a unit, everything, tooling, machines, knowledge of how to, what type of material and all this of how to make the bike. And we had a couple people interested, but then in the late 60s, a fire wiped out that whole shop at White Lake and the railroad tracks. We had all the tooling, we had bikes, extra bikes, we had experimental bikes, we had those carnival cars, we had golf carts. that all got wiped out with that fire. And fortunately, because we were still recovering from the failure of Montgomery Wards, we were still kind of recovering financially with all the inventory we had. There was a policeman waiting at the railroad track, and he saw the lightning hit the building. So that was a heaven sent for the idea that insurance, at least it wasn't the, could have been questionable because financially they were still working their way out,
Right.
So the finance of, owning a business is cool, but it's not always profitable, and it's not always something that you can just continue on. So we went through the hardship of learning that maybe the bike wasn't such a cool idea for them. It was cool for me, I loved it. I still love it, Now I've got a little more to go, but we have just recently put together a park bike. And this is going to go down in Depot Park. It's going to be cemented in. The boiler plate will be sitting on top of the cement, so the wood here is just to move it around. I welded a angle iron on the bottom so the plate won't warp, And so when they're going to put it in the ground, I don't know. I had 8 professionals work on this, and I've got 2 of them here right now, Virginia Frazier and Ron Finch, and they did a great job helping me with this.
Well, it was John Frazier, my husband.
It's Taylor, it's the name of your company is
Automotive Tiller.
Automotive Tailors, whose the credit goes to.
Oh, okay. There you
It's
go.
up to you who you use.
Okay.
Virginia's saying her husband did that. So we had 8 professionals. I went to them and talked to them, and they volunteered their time to put into this and
So
help
is
them
that
with
gonna be
this
a
project.
play toy, or is it gonna be just a structure?
Play toy.
They could sit
It's a
on.
play toy, yeah. You can get on it, and you can do this. We got a rattle in there, and kids can steer it and honk the horn. And well, there's no horn, but I do have a switch on here. There's an on-off switch right down here.
Oh,
There you go, it's on-off. See that? Look at that. No noise. You turn it on. See that? So that's that. The front wheel turns. The back wheel does not turn for safety reason. This wheel turns so the kids can spin this. They can turn the wheel. It somewhat looks like a pony cycle. Parts of the actual pony cycle are here. And then these fabricators all did their magic, and this is what we ended up with. And I can't thank them enough. We're going to have a plaque that's going to fit here in the front. So, going to cover some of your pinstriping, Ron, but it'll cover my plate here, but it'll be here, and it's going to give credit to my grandpa and Hawke Tool, and then credit to the builders that helped me build this. And so this is to hopefully keep the history of pony cycle alive in Clarkston and go from there. So let's take a break. Questions? Yes.
Real quick question, go ahead.
When did you stop making pony cycles?
58. Well, I guess in 58. I have a bike that's a one-of-a-kind bike, and what I think, they probably walked through the shop and said, hey, here's a part up here, look at that, we can build a bike out of all these parts. So they built it, it's got a big box like in the back here, and, yeah, I would say 58. From 53 to 58 was production. All the bikes were sold as 54s, but they were actually built in 53, the initial production run. But they were all 54s,
What were they sold for? How much did they cost?
$185. Of course, if you wanted a red, it was $190 because we had $5 more to pay. Now, the safety thing with the pony cycle, you're sitting on the bike. Now, my dad and grandpa saw, and I keep saying my dad and grandpa, obviously my uncles and whoever, the employees, but they saw a guy start a Cushman. And the guy was off the Cushman, and you had to kickstart it. And he's off the bike, kickstarting the bike. It was in gear, took off, and dragged him across the parking lot. So this way, you're on the pony cycle. You're sitting on it. This is your throttle. Your gas is right here. You got your foot on the brake, and you come down here, and you pull. you're safely on the bike, you've got your foot on the brake, you're ready to ride. In one of the advertisements, it's really great, is to get on it, sit on it, start the bike, and the bike will ride as long as the rider can stay on it. You know, I'm thinking, how can you get away with that today? You know, it's like, so, but that was a safety feature that they had.
So obviously, there's only 1 year. Once you got it going, it's going.
Variable speed. Variable speed.
Depending on how
This
much
bike
you're
will
really
probably do, this bike will probably do 60 miles an hour.
So let's go to a second question. What's the horsepower or CC on that bike loan that we're looking at?
Well, this one here is a 6 horsepower. The variable speed sets up just roughly 1 to 4 and it ends up 1 to 1. So as you drive at variable speeds. So I had a guy come to me, he said, Terry, you're crazy. This bike won't go 50 miles an hour. This bike won't go 30 miles an hour. I said, really? He said, yeah. So I get on and I come back and I said, you're crazy. What are you talking about? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, you never got it opened up. Oh, there's a higher gear? So he came back full of smiles. Oh, he said, that thing really takes off. You know, if you're going to idle with it, yeah, it just pops. If you give it the gas, it shifts, it automatically shifts down. How many here have ridden or used to own a pony cycle? Wow.
Wow.
Look at this. Look at this. This is great. This is great. So,
Wait, I have a question.
yes.
When you pull that start, okay, as a woman, how easy is that to pull the start? Does it start the first time, or do you have to pull and pull and pull?
Well, I had to be 8 years old in order for me, so I couldn't pull him at 7. And you know, Dad, Grandpa, Uncle Earl, the guys the employees at the shop, you know, they would maybe start it for you once or twice, but you know, yeah, right. I mean, enough's enough, Terry. You got to learn to do this yourself, you know. So yeah, this particular one is a big engine. This is a Continental AU12, and AU12, not a 10. This is a monster right here. Continental made only a few of these AU12s, and I got this from a go-karter. They used to use these engines in quarter midgets, the Continental. So this is a monster. I almost broke the back wheel, giving it the gas. Almost broke it on my broke the tire in my driveway.
Oh no.
I mean, it's not a clutch. It's an automatic. You know, just giving it the gas. That's how much power it's got. So.
Do you know how hard it is to get parts?
Oh, well, getting parts for it is like, you know, you've heard of the car Tucker, which, by the way, another story, back in the Tucker day, Grandpa and Hawke Tool made a die for Tucker, Preston Tucker. And he had his shop, was in a barn in Ypsilanti, Michigan, his stamping plant. And my grandpa said, do not hand over the die to Tucker until you get money in your hand. Because Tucker would take your die and he'd run out 50, 60 pieces with your die and give it back to you and have some reason something was wrong. And he built 50 cars. So he would run your part, use your die, and then come up with some lame excuse it wasn't. He was a shyster, you know. So anyway, I have Preston Tucker's calling card I found in my dad's toolbox. So kind of cool, you know. But just like with my grandpa, with him, with Highland Park, I mean, my grandpa must have known Henry Ford. Now, my dad worked at the Rouge plant. He was an experimental engineer for Ford Motor at the Rouge, and he rode the elevator once with Ford. And I don't know if there were any words talked, you know, when Mr. Ford is in the elevator. And another cool story, my grandpa at Hawke Tool was Mr. Hawke Grandpa. You addressed my grandpa as Mr. Hawke. He was Mr. Hawke. But I would go, Mr. Hawke, and as he was turning, I'd go, Grandpa. You know, it'd be, you just don't go up to him in the shop and say, Grandpa. You know, it'd be Mr. Hawke, Grandpa. He always had a white shirt on, and he could run any machine in that shop, and his white shirt would be white at the end of the day. And my wife can't understand how I can just go out and get the mail and come back and have a dirty shirt. She checked me out on the way here. But, you know, like, Where does it come from? It just comes out of the woodwork. I don't know where. So oh, yes, another story. I was given a boxer in high school. My uncle gave me a boxer dog, and beautiful dog, Mr. Chips, beautiful dog. And so when I went to college, my dad took over the dog, if you will. And my dad would take the dog into work up here at Clarkston. And my dad was getting jealous and just couldn't understand what it was, why that dog was following Grandpa all around the shop. That dog would never leave my Grandpa alone. And my dad was over at the house next door, and Grandma was bawling Grandpa out for the grease he had in his pocket. Well, Grandpa was taking bacon and putting it in his pocket. And my dad didn't feel so bad. I mean, my dad thought it was his personality. I mean, why is the dog like Grandpa better than me? So, a little trick that Grandpa had, up his sleeve. I got more, but why don't you come up and take a look at what I got here, and questions, I'm open for them. And I've shown these bikes, and everyone thinks it's a Cushman because that's a name that's been around for a long time, well-built bike. The one thing about the pony cycle is it was built to be a motor scooter, right from the get-go. It's not a bicycle with a motor. It's not some pieces of steel put together with a wheel. I mean, this was built to be right from the get-go. And article in Cycle Magazine talks about it being a small motorcycle. So you can sit on the park bike. It's going to be cemented in the ground. The boilerplate's going to sit on top of the pad. I don't know when they're going to do the pad, but few other little items here during the Depression. My grandpa made a die. This is a door stop. It's called Sure Stop. And a little bit of rubber to where to go under your door so the wind wouldn't blow it. This was probably made 30, yeah. And then he made this, and this is interesting, the slotted screwdriver. At the time, Phillips had a patent, Phillips had a patent, which is the screwdriver with the X on it. But they had a patent, but they wanted so much to use their patent, nobody was using it. Because, you can come up with a patent, but you got to make it to where people want to use it. So one of Grandpa's first jobs was this slotted screwdriver. You pinch it, put it in the slot of the screwdriver, and it holds the screw. And I use it all the time. I just used it to put the license plates on. Not this one, this is the one that's never been used. And what's interesting is putting that slot in there. I mean, right down the middle of that square. I mean, he had to be pretty fine keeping that from wanting to wander off in that. So these are a couple little jobs that my grandpa, did as far as Hawke tool. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. And he had a little rubber handle put on it.